comp and timeline panels. I start by showing you how to set up new compositions, or comps as they're called in After Effects, and then I show you how to add assets to a comp, assets like video files and audio files. I go on from there to show you how to create some specialized layers within a comp, like text and shape layers, and I conclude by showing you text and shape layers. There are multiple ways to make comps, and I'm going to show you several in this lesson. To follow along, just open up After Effects. Move past the startup screen and get to this empty slate here. We're not going to save this project, we're just going to keep it as an untitled project. You can create comps manually or automatically. I'm going to show you the manual method first. There are a couple of ways to access this manual method. You can go up to Composition, New Composition, keyboard shortcuts Control or Command N, or you can click on this Create a New Composition icon down here. In either case, you open up this Composition Settings dialog box. Now, unlike setting up a new project, which has only a couple of options, that is a file name and a file folder location, compositions have many more options. Let's just take a look at the three tabs here. You've got the Basic tab, Advanced, and 3D Renderer. We're not going to work with either of these two. The Advanced mainly refers to how things play back in motion blur, and the 3D Renderer gives you three options: Classic 3D, Cinema 4D, or Ray Trace 3D. We're not going to be working with Cinema 4D or Ray Trace 3D objects in this lesson. We're going to stick with Classic 3D. And Classic 3D means that you're working with 2D flat objects in 3D space. So I'm going to go back to the Basic tab here. Generally, when you make a composition from scratch like this, you use a preset. Here's the presets drop-down list. You can see the various presets here: NTSC and PAL. We've got HDV, which is kind of a compressed HD, DVC Pro, and some HD TV formats, along with some film formats. I almost always work in 1080p HD here. I just choose that preset. The preset has a resolution of 1920 by 1080. The aspect ratio is locked to 16 by 9. We work with square pixels as opposed to these various other kinds of pixels. And the frame rate's 2997. And we have a 30-second duration. And the background color is black. Now, the background color is just a convenience. This will not show up in your final video. This just helps you when you're working in the composition to have something in the background relative to what you're putting in. Sometimes you want to work with a white background or some other color. I usually stick with black. So now I can just change the name if I want to. I'll change it. In this case, I'll call it New Comp. And I click OK. And that composition is now open down here in the timeline, waiting for you to add some assets or create some new layers. When I talk about creating layers, you do that when you right-click here and say New. There's several layer types that you can add to a composition that you cannot add as an asset over here. So that's the manual method to add a comp. But there's some automated ways to add comps as well. Let's start off by bringing in a Photoshop file. Double-click here in the project panel. Go to wherever you have your materials folder located. Double-click on that and double-click on Assets. And then bring in this Photoshop file. You can just double-click on it. It opens up this dialog box here inside After Effects. Then it says Import Kind. You can import as footage or composition. If you bring it in as footage, you're just going to bring in basically a still image, just a flat still image. But if you choose a composition, then it automatically creates a composition for you. And you almost always want to retain layer sizes. Then you almost always want to have editable layer styles. Even if you don't have layer styles in there, just choose that by default. And then click OK. And that creates a new comp. It creates a new comp based on the name of the file, dialog box here inside After Effects. Then it says Import Kind. You can import as footage or composition. If you bring it in as footage, you're just going to bring in basically a still image, just a flat still image. But if you choose a composition, then it automatically creates a composition for you. And you almost always want to retain layer sizes. Then you almost always want to have editable layer styles. Even if you don't have layer styles in there, just choose that by default. And then click OK. And that creates a new comp. It creates a new comp based on the name of the file, Two Women in Background, and it puts all the layers in a separate folder down here. Now, if I look at this comp in the preview, you see that it's 4608 by 3456, much bigger than HD. You probably will not use this comp because normally when you make a comp, you want to think about your output. You want to think about what you're going to create and how you're going to play it back. And almost always it's going to be in an HD format. So this is too big for HD. So what you're going to end up doing probably is taking these layers and putting them inside this new comp, for example. So that would be a typical workflow. Let's take a look at bringing in an Illustrator file. I'm going to close this down and double click again here. Getting this Illustrator file here by double clicking on it. We get the same kind of dialog box here. I don't want footage because I don't want a single layer. I want a composition. We're going to automatically create a composition, and you almost always want to go with layer sizes as opposed to document size. And that creates a new comp, again named after the file, called camping. And if you look at its resolution, you see that it takes on the resolution of the file as well, which is not HD. It's a little bit narrower than HD and a little bit taller than HD. So again, you probably will place these elements inside an HD comp. But let's just take a look at the rest of the characteristics of this comp. You can right click on any comp here. You can see the comp icon there. And go to composition settings. You see that same dialog box again. And the only thing that's different now is just the resolution. You still have square pixels, you still have a 2997 frame rate, and you still have a 30-second duration and a black background. It takes on whatever you worked on before. The only change is the resolution here. Alright, I'll just cancel out of that. You can create comps from assets here inside the project panel. So let's import a couple of things here. Double click on this. I'm going to import the background JPEG here. Click on that. And also want to import this video file. So I control or command click on that to select two individual items that are not contiguous. And then I click import. And that brings in those two files. If I take the background image file here and just drag it down to the new comp icon, let's just see what happens when I do that. It creates a new comp. And makes the comp the size of the image, much bigger than HD, 4608 by 3456. Again, if I right click on this, you'll see that the composition settings are the same for everything else except for the resolution. Cancel out of that. It changes the resolution relative to what we worked on a second ago, but notice now the duration is 320. It's as long as the video. So when you add video, it will change the duration to the duration of the video. It also has a different starting time code. It takes the original time code off the video when I shot this. The time code at that point was 2 minutes into this particular video. It will change the duration to the duration of the video. It also has a different starting time code. It takes the original time code off the video when I shot this. The time code at that point was 2 minutes into this particular shoot. So the fact that the starting time code is down here, 234.28, might confuse you when you're working on it down here in the comp. So you can change this to 0 if you want to, which is kind of the default thing to do. So I go 0, semicolon 0, semicolon 0, let's see what happens to do. So I go 0, semicolon 0, semicolon 0, let's see what happens when I do that. Click away and it sets it to 0 like that. And I click OK, and then it sets the starting time code down here to 0. And you can now see that it's 3 seconds and 20 frames long, the length of the video clip. And it's a little bit easier to manipulate now because you know exactly you're 1 second in at that point, you're exactly 2 seconds in at that point. So those are the various ways that you can make new compositions.